Hello everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are back again with another sort of basic topic, but one that I think is really important, and that would be how to stay safe while entering the BDSM community. This is something I covered a way long time ago on my channel. It was one of the first 10 videos I made, maybe, and it never really got that many views. I know why. It's not that exciting. Like, when you could be watching a video about kitten play or ABDL or spanking, like, why wouldn't you watch that one instead? I get it. But I think it is something that we should all learn about before we get into all of that good, exciting, fun stuff. And I know in particular right now, even if you aren't brand new to BDSM, many of us have been away for a long time, our lives have changed, maybe we've moved, and we have been gone maybe for a year and a half, 2 years because of COVID and just everything going on in the world. And so I think even if you're not new, it is still important to just take all of this in and just give yourself a little bit of a refresher. And if you are brand new, this is going to set you up for having the best time, the safest time, while also still being able to have a lot of fun. So, all that being said, I think the first thing that we should keep in mind is something called frenzy. What is frenzy? It is essentially this kid in a candy store phenomenon where when we finally get to do kink for the first time, we're like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. I want to do all of it right now, all the time, with everyone, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Give me everything because I finally get to do this thing that I've dreamed about for maybe my whole life. And that is great to be enthusiastic, but we need to rein it in a little bit. And I will note here as well that you will usually hear this be called sub-frenzy. I just call it frenzy because I really think this is a mentality that you can accidentally fall into if you are a dom, a top, a switch, a bottom, a whatever. It doesn't matter what your label is. I think we should just monitor our own behavior and thoughts to see if maybe we're going in this direction. And the reason why this is sort of a safety issue is because when you are in that mentality of, I want to do everything all the time, oh my gosh, this is so great, it reduces your ability to think critically and evaluate, is this something I am really prepared for? Is this somebody that I feel safe around? Is this something that I have the energy for? Many little tiny things that can all add up to turn a good experience, or what could have been a good experience, into a more negative one. And you really don't want to ignore your gut. And I think that is the key thing with this, is what it does is it basically has a special override key in your brain where you stop thinking about what you're doing and just go, but we should just try it just because, oh, this, and you'll try to justify things in your head that when you look on this again in like 2 years, you're going to be like, oh my God, why did I? No, baby kinkster me, why? And so you want to prevent that future cringe and just check in and be like, okay, what's going on right now? Am I feeling a certain way or not? Do I have space to step away and think about this more? It is okay to say no to things. It is okay to say maybe later. I think it is a good idea to just breathe, take that step back, evaluate, observe, learn before you go right into doing the thing. And that can be really tempting because you're like, oh, it's right there. I finally get to do it. Pause, slow down. It will be there tomorrow. It will be there next week. You don't have to do it all right now. And it's hard to overcome that programming sometimes, but it is possible. So come up with a game plan for yourself. If you are going to a party and you do want to play, commit to doing one scene. Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 10. In the moment, it might seem physically possible, but then the next day, the next week, when you are coming down from doing all of that wonderful stuff, it is a recipe for one heck of an emotional, physical hangover. Now, I just, in general, don't recommend leaping into play right away. I really think it is better to take your time and establish yourself in the community first and get those connections there. So how that would normally go is you would attend a non-play party event, something like a munch, which is a low-pressure social gathering, typically at a restaurant or a bar, where you talk, you hang out, you mingle, you have a drink, you have a pizza, some fries, and you just go and meet people. That's the whole point. You can also go to things like classes, discussion groups, outdoor meetups that have some kind of theme to them, like maybe playing volleyball or outdoor chess. I don't know what your community's into. Whatever it is, find things that are social that don't involve play. And how that is helpful is it allows you, again, to meet people, to know the who's who, find out who is safe and who is not. Where are the different venues? Who has house parties? Which places have a good reputation and which ones don't? Because especially when you are in those purely social spaces, most people have your own best interest in mind. They want you to come back. They're going to help you navigate this kind of confusing world of BDSM and being able to tell who is who they say they are and who is not. It's not foolproof, but it is a really good thing to do, especially because when you do venture out and you do start to have scenes, if you don't already have anyone in your life that is kinky, that knows about this part of who you are, it's great to have people you can go back to and say, hey, I had my first scene. Hey, I played with this person. It went this way, or this made me feel weird. Is this normal? And it's so helpful to have that. I know it was vital in my initial experience to have older people, especially that I could talk to that had been doing BDSM for a long time, where they could go, oh yeah, that means this, or this is called this, or whatever else. And I highly recommend you prioritize that over just meeting play partners. And that is another safety thing that a lot of people fall into, is they just go because they want to find someone to play with. Again, I think it is better to take your time, get to know people, and honestly, you're gonna have more success if your mindset is, I just want to go to make connections and meet people. Don't attach any sort of label on it. Don't say, I'm gonna go to this place, I'm gonna find 2 people to do a scene with, I'm gonna find my future mistress, whatever. Just go there to meet people and find out, hey, does this vibe with me? Are these people my people? Like, if you get too in your head about, I need this thing to happen, it makes it a lot harder for that thing to happen. Because most people can smell if you are just there to poach for a play partner, they are going to put their walls up a little bit more than if you are there out of a genuine desire to just meet people and get to know whoever is in your local space. Once you have gone through the work of attending a few munches or going to a class or two, and you know a few names, you know some people, you may end up getting asked to play. And that is wonderful. That's so amazing. I do have a few guidelines for that though. One, I really don't recommend saying yes to random invites you get on FetLife. If you get somebody who messages you that's like, hey, I see that you're in my area and you're 18, I am 47, I would love to tie you up in my house. Red flag, don't do that. At best, it is a really good way to get catfished, and at worst, it's a really good way to get murdered in someone's apartment. Now, the exception to this is maybe somebody that is like obviously really well established locally, somebody that attends the same parties, somebody that has a lot of mutual friends with you on FetLife, somebody that has a lot of easily identifiable photos, somebody that has a lot of interactions on their profile from other people that you already know, somebody that you can basically fact check a little bit more easily. However, even if it is somebody you have already talked to in person 4 times, a dozen times, or it's a brand new person you just met, I always recommend something called public negotiations. And if you watch my channel at all, you know that I am very much against doing any kind of BDSM in public. Like, please do not go to a playground and do your bondage scene on the swing set. That is a big no-no. I am not talking about that. What I am referring to is the act of talking about what it is you want to do and what it is that you are okay with or not. That is a negotiation. It does not actually involve any kind of doing BDSM, any kind of power exchange, groveling, anything like that. It is just talking and maybe writing down what it is you would like to do. And I recommend doing this in a public place because it gives you an opportunity to talk in a non-BDSM environment. Because if you are in a dungeon, if you are in a play space, that can put your mind in maybe a different frame where you maybe would negotiate differently, or you would see this person differently, or you might be more willing to compromise in ways that make you uncomfortable. So it really just levels the playing field. It also allows you that opportunity to meet someone in a neutral space. So, if you are a new person in the scene and they are older, more experienced, they run the party, if you are negotiating in that setting, that kind of puts them in a place where their authority matters more, if that makes sense. So negotiating in public is good for a lot of reasons. I would recommend something like a public coffee shop or a park, something where you are in public, but it's less likely that people are going to directly eavesdrop, or it's going to be really obvious what you're talking about. You want a little bit of background ambiance music, people talking to cover up your conversation. Now, I'm not going to get into the how of negotiations right now because I have talked about that so many other times. Links down below for videos on how to do that, but I do have a few more tips. So when you are in public, I do think it may also be a good idea to take notes on what you are talking about. That could be on your phone, that could be with a notepad. Just have a written record for your own frame of mind. So a few reasons here. One would be if you have someone that's actually pretty unethical and later wants to say that you said you were okay with something that you really weren't okay with, you have your own direct reference to go back to. Also, if you do have maybe a week, a couple weeks between when you are actually going to play and when you talk, you are going to be more able to remember what it was you talked about. So kind of regardless, it's about your memory and just being able to have that clear record for any future reference. Also, it will help you for in other scenes. You can go back and say, okay, we tried this. I knew that this, and this worked, and this thing over here kind of made me a little bit uncomfortable. So it's a really, really good tool to have. And also, one of the most obvious reasons that meeting in person is a good idea is you get to double check if you actually vibe together. I think this is something that people don't always realize when they are new is just because you have all of the same kinks, you have the same fetish, you want the same things out of a scene, doesn't actually mean that you are really compatible and work together. On paper, you can be totally great and be like, oh my gosh, ideal match, sent from the stars, heaven above, oh my goodness. And then when you meet in person, it's like staring at a brick wall. Like there's just nothing. And you can kind of get around that lack of compatibility, like vibe stuff a little bit, but really, if you want to have a good scene, you want to make sure you have that energy compatibility, not just what is actually on the paper. But really, the most important part of your toolkit is not the negotiation. It is not having notes. It's not writing things down on paper. It is the work that you do before any of that even happens. By which I mean introspection and learning. I talk about this all of the time. But knowledge is power. Do not believe people that say crap like, oh, well, real submissives have to be molded by doms and they shouldn't really learn anything on their own because they may be misled. Like, if somebody says anything like that, no, red flag, bye, see you later. As a submissive, as a top, a bottom, literally whatever it is you want to do, learn what you can. Again, take classes, read books, watch YouTube videos, talk to other people in your community, go to discussions, just take your time and learn. And you can do a bunch of things for this depending on how your brain works. You can journal, you can draw, you can just think to yourself quietly, what am I really into? What does this mean for me? What resonates with me? What do I want? And take as much time as you need to really, really build up that base of this is what kink is about for me. This is what I am drawn to. This is what I don't want to do. Is kink sexual for you or not? Do you want a relationship or not? Or do you want something casual? So many of those details can be lost in just sort of assuming everyone else is operating the same way. And then suddenly you get through a negotiation and you thought you were negotiating for a one-time scene, and they thought they were negotiating for a lifetime power exchange relationship. So you want to know what you want ahead of time, so that way you can advocate for yourself in the best way possible. And also, when you are informed about the play that you want to do, be that wax play, pet play, bondage, anything, you will be able to give better feedback to your tops. You will be able to test whether or not the top actually knows what they are talking about. You will be able to ask for more particular things during negotiation, and that will help keep you safe. The number one thing that people take advantage of when people are new is their lack of knowledge. And just because you are new actually doesn't mean you have to be completely clueless. It doesn't mean that you come in a blank slate knowing nothing. You can learn a lot before you ever even go to your first party. I don't want to confuse anyone. I'm not saying you need to have perfect knowledge of everything before you get into doing play or doing a scene for the first time. What I am trying to get at is that it is okay to equip yourself with knowledge. But at the same time, if you don't know something, it is also important to be honest. I don't mean publicly announcing to everyone on FetLife or at a munch, hey everyone, I'm brand new, I don't know anything, please take advantage of my naivete. Like, I'm not saying to do that, but you should be honest. Do not say you know more than you do, or like, yeah, I've been doing BDSM for 5 years, and like, I've been doing artistic needle play for like ever, and so I totally know everything. Don't even worry about it. If you don't know what that is at all and somebody just brings it up, don't act like you know what it is to impress anyone, or lie about your experience, or lie that you have knowledge about play that you don't. It is okay to say, actually, I am kind of new and I'm not really sure what I am into or not, or I don't really know what that is. Can you explain it to me? You can double check afterwards. You can get information from other people, but it is okay to say, hey, I'm not really sure what this is. And also, part of this is sort of evaluating, is this person a good play partner for someone that is new? In my mind, when you are playing with a new person, I would go about making a scene that is maybe one or two things at the most, right? You know, let's do a little bit of light decorative bondage. Let's do a short scene that involves a spanking. Let us see what it feels like for you to wear a gag. And that should really be the core of it, because BDSM, even if from the outside it seems really simple, can actually have a very profound emotional impact that you might not be prepared for. So, you know, if you want to in the future, you can add in the bondage and the gags and the blindfold and the ice cubes and the wax all together at the same time in a later scene. But you don't need to do it the first time you ever do BDSM with someone. When it comes to actually doing the scene, I would recommend playing in a public dungeon, somewhere that has dungeon monitors, also known as DMs. Their job is to watch everyone playing, to make sure everyone has a good time, everyone is following the rules, and to step in if something goes wrong. When it comes to looking at play spaces, you need to read the descriptions and look at the pictures, look at past parties, look at whatever it is they have available, and evaluate that very carefully. Because if you are in the US, there are many places that are really sex clubs for swingers, or bars that have dungeon-themed party nights that are not really public dungeons. And I'm not saying that those things are bad or that they are lesser, but they typically have very different standards and priorities. So for example, at a bar, their job is to keep you buying drinks for as long as possible. And so they are going to act very differently about substances and intoxicated people than a normal dungeon would. If you were at a swingers club where sex is the main focus, if sex is not your thing, you're not really going to have that good of a time. And on that note, I will say with intoxication, if you are at a munch, if you are at some kind of social event, it's normal to have a casual drink or two, right? Like when you're getting a casual dinner with a friend or maybe your family, it's not about drinking to get drunk. And it's not about drinking before you play. That is very important. I know in other parts of the world, drinking and then doing BDSM is much more normalized. But in my mind, what I recommend for having the best possible outcome and keeping consent in the highest possible framework, I think that it is generally a bad idea to do BDSM while intoxicated, while drunk. And so if you feel like you need to drink, if you need to be high in order to do BDSM, you aren't actually ready to do BDSM yet, and you should take that step back and figure out what you need to work on to be in a place where you feel comfortable doing kink without having to have the help of additional substances. And I do want to add a recent thought that I've had in here as well, which is I also do not recommend doing BDSM while emotionally compromised, because that can impair your decision making almost just as much as being drunk. And an example of this would be if you are just getting out of a 20-year marriage. My voice. What is going on with my voice? If you are just getting out of a 20-year marriage, if you are crying over your ex-boyfriend every single night, it is probably not a good time to use BDSM as a rebound. Again, take that time, step back. You can always rejoin the community at a later date when you are in a better headspace, but it is really dangerous to try and use BDSM as a way to patch up your emotional problems. We also often play with something called safe words. Those would be the standard. And what a safe word is it is some kind of verbal cue, a signal, a physical motion, which is intended to be observed by the person you are doing a scene with to tell them, hey, this needs to stop. And again, this is a really clear red flag. If someone says, oh, I never play with safe words, or I don't believe in safe words, or only babies play with safe words, again, red flag, step away. There are very particular cases where some people do not play with safe words. As a brand new person to playing with BDSM in general, to a scene, to a person, you don't need to do that. Playing with safe words is perfectly acceptable. And it is really important because if you are playing, for example, in a dungeon and they have a house safe word, typically that would be either safe word itself or red, that will alert the person you are in the scene with, as well as other people who are watching, hey, something's going wrong here, please interfere. And that is a really powerful tool to have to help keep yourself safe. Of course, I understand that not everyone has the option to go to a public dungeon. Even if they were around before, I know a lot of places that have had numerous dungeons close, and most of them have not opened back up. They have shut down seemingly forever. And so it may be your only feasible option is to go play in private or to go to a house party. I would most likely recommend going to a house party first because at least there are other people around. Now, house parties can be quite variable in their quality, shall we say. They can basically be like publicly run dungeons where they have very high standards. Other times, they can be just absolute ragers full of drugs and no oversight and just no one paying attention to anything going on. So I would say no matter where you are going, public dungeon, house party, anywhere, do not have the first time you go somewhere also be the first time you play with a stranger. Just like when you are meeting someone in person and you want to see if your energy works together, you also want to do that with a play space to figure out, hey, does this place like have rules and standards? Do they have cleaning devices available for their equipment? Do they actually have the kind of play going on that I want to have around me? Am I comfortable here? Is it accessible for me? Like, there are many things that you would want to evaluate in a play space. And when you are there, just to see what's going on, meet people, be an observer, that is going to give you the information you need about, hey, I feel comfortable here, or maybe I don't and I want to try somewhere else. Now, no matter where you are going, I also recommend having something called a safe call. A safe call is a really old tool that we have for the community. And essentially what it is it is a prearranged communication with somebody that is not going to the party, that has specific instructions about what to do based on your responses. And this can take many different forms. The most basic of which is you have one time in the evening where you go to the bathroom, you call your friend and say, hey, I'm doing great, thanks for checking in, okay, bye, talk to you, in 2 hours or whatever, and that's it. But if you need more security, you can add additional layers to this. So maybe you have coded text messages. Maybe you have multiple check-ins. Maybe you tell them, hey, if you call me and you don't hear from me within 5 minutes, call the police. You also want to make sure they have some additional information, maybe the address of the venue or the address of the person you're meeting, having the phone number or contact information for the venue that you are going to. Tell them how long you plan to stay out for and when the party is supposed to be over. And again, giving them lots of instructions about what to do if something happens or you don't happen to contact them. This person does not have to be in the lifestyle. They don't have to know about BDSM. They don't have to know that you're doing BDSM. All they have to know is where you are going, that information I mentioned, and be somebody who is consistent and will be available if something does happen. Now, if you want more information about how to prepare for a safe call and what to do, there is a really great old web page that I believe is from the Evil Monk. I will put it down below. And sometimes you can't beat information from the 1990s on the internet. For something more modern, I would also say it is a good idea to share your location either on Google Maps or by some other app. There are tons out there for family safety, sharing your information with friends. Of course, if you don't want them to know you're doing BDSM and the location shows up as a BDSM fetish club, that is probably going to out you a little bit, but it is a really good thing to do in case, maybe you lose your phone or they see you going to a completely different location that you did not talk about. That can give someone a lot of valuable information if they have that at their disposal. Also, having your own transportation is a really good idea. You want to set yourself up for as much autonomy as possible. Do not make yourself reliant on your play partner. If you drive, that means driving yourself. Have a friend drive you and have them pick you up at a prearranged time. If you don't drive, if you don't feel comfortable with a car, have a pre-planned bus route and always make sure you either have some kind of transportation card if maybe you're in London and you use the underground, or maybe you have some spare cash on hand for a taxi or an Uber. It is really easy to lose track of time while doing BDSM. So if you want to make sure to not miss a phone call or your bus home, be sure to have an alarm set on your phone. I know that different dungeons will have varying rules about phone usage, but every dungeon that I have ever gone to is okay with phones being on and having a ringer on, at least in some kind of locker area or a changing room. That can also give you a really good excuse to leave and go somewhere private and say, oh, hey, I need to check my phone, it's in the changing room, and just have that moment to excuse yourself. If you cannot have a phone on you for some reason, or if it needs to be on silent, you can do a vibration on your phone instead. If that is still not okay, you can also just use an actual mechanical watch or some kind of fitness tracker or an Apple Watch, something to make sure that you are not missing out on those important pieces of information. Now, if you have absolutely no other option but to play in private, I know that you're going to do it anyways, so I have some additional safety information for you there. The number one thing that I would recommend is having a spotter. Do not go to a person's house alone because they are functionally a stranger. I know that having a chaperone can ruin the mood, but what is better? Having a slightly awkward scene or being murdered? And I am being a little bit serious here because we did have an altercation a few years ago where I live where somebody literally was almost murdered because they went to a stranger's house to do BDSM. So I would also recommend bringing something like pepper spray or mace if that is legal where you live. Again, make sure you have your own money, your own transportation. If your friends are not available to chaperone, again, very, very bare minimum, have someone there to pick you up and drop you off. Make sure that they know and you know other people know exactly where you are. Make sure to give other people as much contact information for this person as possible. Their address, their license plate, their name, their contact information. You want to do that while also keeping as much of your own information as private as possible. Make sure the person doesn't know your home address. Make sure they don't know your license plate. Make sure they don't know your place of work. All of those things in the wrong hands could cause someone to directly retaliate against you or stalk you if something doesn't exactly go their way. I already mentioned this in the recent video that I did on rope bondage tips, but even if you are playing in public, having someone like a spotter isn't a bad idea. It is just less necessary because you will usually have people like DMs or other attendees that are also watching your scene. One other tip for playing in private that I would go towards is meet this person ahead of time in public as many times as you can. Meet them at munches, meet them in coffee shops, meet them in other BDSM social scenarios, meet them in classes, see how they interact with others. And there is a couple reasons for this. One, somebody that is only interested in abusing and using new people and taking advantage will typically be less interested if they realize that you are willing to wait before getting right into the play. They will just go on to the next target. That does not mean that they will be totally unwilling to wait for as long as is necessary. Some people that intend bad things are willing to do whatever it takes for however long it takes to reach what they want to get to. However, it is a fairly good buffer. It also shows you that they are also invested in making sure that they get to know you and that you will both have a good time if they are willing to meet and interact more casually several times before you actually get into the play itself. So that can also be a good thing. I would say for me, I would do that 4 times, 5 times. I would maybe say even a month, 2 months is not too long to wait before playing with somebody in private. Again, if that is your only option. But in terms of safety, I really don't recommend going this route. But I understand that some people are going to do it anyways, so I would rather people have that information than not. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on in terms of safety that I haven't gotten to yet is actually privacy. And this one is very important because many of the people that want to do BDSM would be in a lot of trouble if their vanilla lives and their kink lives accidentally crossed paths. And so maybe people are teachers, they work for the government, they have a security clearance, they are a really important public figure. And so for them, they really need to make sure, again, those paths don't accidentally cross. And you have a few tools to be able to do that with. No matter what, just being able to keep that separation is good for anyone to do. Number one would be to have a scene name. This is a pseudonym that we use in the world of BDSM to keep our kink persona and our vanilla life separate. I have a whole video where I talk about how to pick out a good scene name, which I will link down below. If you are on FetLife, which is basically the Facebook of the kink world, I would recommend not having public pictures except for your profile picture. And for things that you do post, I would recommend keeping out your full face, having easily identifiable features also not be in the photos, things like tattoos or birthmarks, so that way you can have a degree of separation. You want to make sure that it is as hard as possible to connect your kink profiles with your vanilla ones. So if you have, let's say, a vanilla Instagram account, don't put the same photos on there as you do on your kink one or your vanilla Facebook page and your FetLife photos, because a single reverse image search on Google can bring up a lot of information. Also, be very careful about the people you choose to share your legal name with, your place of work, your occupation, because again, in the wrong hands, that information can be used to track you down and expose you non-consensually. And I would really recommend taking your time, working your way up to that level of trust with someone just in case they happen to misuse it. Now, we have a very strong taboo in our community against outing people and exposing people because, you know, in order to sort of expose one person for doing BDSM, you kind of also have to expose yourself in the process, but that doesn't mean that you should be flippant with the information that you do provide. I would also recommend keeping communications to things that are kink-oriented websites like FetLife. However, I know the messaging is really not good on there. They do not have a mobile app. So if you do need to move to another platform for communication, either use a burner phone number or use something that is not connected to a phone number at all, something like Discord. Also, bonus points, if you are on Discord, many local communities, especially for TNG groups, that is the next generation, that is for people 18 to 35, a lot of them have their own Discord chats, which also means you can keep in touch with people even if you aren't able to go to munches or other events regularly. All right, I have been talking for a very long time now at this point. I think I have given a lot of advice. I know I have most likely not said everything that you can do to keep yourself safe. Again, all of my other videos talking about red flags, negotiation processes, how to have a scene name, everything I mentioned, that will be down below. And I would love to hear from you all. If you are thinking about safety, what are some things that you do to keep yourself safe? What are your number one tips? Anything else, any comments, questions, you can put down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this, if you have not already, please do subscribe because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you really enjoyed this, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. That is what makes all of these videos possible. If you do already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.